From the Great Basin to the Rockies to the four corners of Utah, Colorado, Arizona, and New Mexico. Dwayne Benson here for KMMU Main Street Media, Utah, coming to you live. We're streaming on YouTube, Rumble, X, Twitter, and our website, kmmu.org. Please join our host, Dan Fillmore, for Let's Talk Utah's Dan the Eagle.
Welcome back, everybody. It's another episode of Dan the Eagle every Wednesday at 4:30. Today, we have an amazing show ready for you. We're joined by David Pyne, who is the Executive Deputy Director for the task force for the EMP task force. He advises policymakers on how to defend against and prevent attacks from electromagnetic pulses. So he's a military expert. He also, we were talking a little bit about tariffs earlier this week, and Trump has been sending tariffs across the entire world, it seems. And so that's going to be the major subject of our conversation. Really excited to have him on. If you're not already subscribed, go ahead and subscribe on our YouTube channel, on our X, and on our Rumble, Main Street Media Utah, or you can go to our website, kmmu.org, and get all of our shows live there every weekday. David, thanks so much for joining the show.
Hey, Dan, great to be with you.
Appreciate you having you on. So tell us a little bit about what you do and how that relates with international relations and tariffs.
Yeah, so I have got a strong defense background. I went to Georgetown University, got a master's in national security studies. I'm a former U.S. Army combat officer, and I also served as a U.S. Army headquarters staff officer from 2000-2003 with responsibility, oversight over armaments cooperation with North and South America, Africa, Eastern Europe, the former Soviet Union, and the Middle East. I worked for Senator Mike Lee as his national security director during his campaign, organized a military advisory committee consisting of 2 brigadier generals and some colonels for him to advise him on national security policy. So I briefed him, I think, really just monthly, got 6 times, I think, before he was he's sworn in as a senator. I decided not to apply to his congressional staff, which maybe was a mistake, seeing that his latest national security advisor was just elevated to the position of acting assistant secretary of defense for
international
security policy. Could have been me.
Oh, man.
Probably not, because I would have been, left that position some time ago. But I could have applied, and he could have put in a good word for me. So.
Well, it sounds like you have quite the pedigree and a lot of experience internationally. And that's really what we have you here for, is because we want to talk about international stuff. I know you have to get going by about 5 o'clock, so I want to jump right in and talk about tariffs. I want to get this out of the way, and I want your opinion on them. Are you 2 thumbs up to the tariffs that Trump has done? 1 thumb? I mean, are you happy about them? Tell me what you're feeling about the Trump tariffs.
I'm super happy. As I tell my wife, every day is like Christmas for me, because a lot of the things that I've been calling for U.S. leaders to do for decades, in terms of improving relations with Russia, ending the war in Ukraine, splitting up the Sino-Russian military alliance, and also going back to reciprocal tariffs, which we had until the 1970s. And actually, to some degree, in the 1980s under Reagan as well. All those things are things that Trump is doing. And,
Right.
He has a lot of people, that don't understand him, the never Trumpers, think he's pursuing a policy of chaos. That's far from true. He knows exactly how to increase U.S. national security, increase our economic prosperity, wealth, and power across a wide range of areas. Every other president, recent president, other than himself, of course, has been putting America last in every way: foreign policy, trade policy, destroying our manufacturing capabilities, exporting them to China, really just making it impossible for us to fight a war against Russia or China, because 2/3 of the critical components which we need to produce advanced weapon systems are obtained from China.
Right. So it sounds like you're definitely in favor of tariffs when it comes to hurting China and for national security interests. And I think that the majority of Americans would agree with you there. China is a very unique actor in international politics. They're dishonest, they're nasty, they steal IP, they intentionally flood markets with cheap goods so that it undercuts American wages. And then also when it comes to semiconductors, we saw in COVID when we needed masks and medicine, so much of it was made in China that we were just kind of, we couldn't do anything for ourselves. So I think in that case, Americans are for it. I think where Americans have a hard time with tariffs, and I'm kind of in this group as well, is when you put tariffs on people just because they don't have a trade surplus with the United States, like with Madagascar, for example, or Lesotho, or these random little countries like Vietnam, where we have a deficit with them, but that's only because we're purchasing t-shirts from there and they're not really buying anything from us because they don't have a lot of money. What do you say to Americans who would say that, sure, it's fine to tariff China for that kind of stuff, but tariffing other nations just for a deficit is foolish?
Well, it's not just for a deficit. If you look at those countries, Vietnam, for example, is one of the worst offenders. They have 96% tariffs against us. Trump only, he decided not to do reciprocal tariffs. Not one of these tariffs is reciprocal. That was my big disappointment, is that they didn't match other countries' tariffs, because the whole purpose of reciprocal tariffs is other countries get to set our tariff percentage. So, for example, if we match EU tariffs dollar for dollar, if they complain about our tariffs, they just have to go lower, and without any action on the part of the United States, we will match what those tariffs are. So, if they want to go to zero, we go to zero. If China wants to go to zero, we go to zero. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. So that was really my only disappointment. But yeah, in terms of these tariffs are, not only are they not reciprocal, they're quote unquote discounted tariffs, which means they are 50% of what the other countries are charging us. So I guess I'm kind of, while I understand a lot of the concern about the stock market, for example, and markets, upsetting markets and forcing companies that are, betraying us to China to move back to the US, I certainly understand that. And there's definitely economic dislocation. There might even be a temporary economic recession involved before we experience massive economic growth and prosperity. But what I don't understand is why other countries, everyone that complains about the tariffs thinks it's great that other countries have 100% tariffs or 96% tariffs or 80% tariffs, but we're not allowed to tariff them back. I mean, what's the point of that?
Sure. From what I've heard is that a lot of these countries that Trump said has 90% tariffs on us, he was using the deficit to calculate the amount of tariffs that he was placing on them. But that's a whole nother story. I think that most Americans, I personally love the idea of equalizing trade, that the fact that we can't sell our cheese, our dairy, our vehicles into Canada is crazy. And we can't send all sorts of stuff to the European Union. That's also crazy. So I like the idea of being able to negotiate that kind of way. But the fear that I think that I have is that there are a lot of concerns that tariffs are taxes on consumers. That sure, America can make our own cars, but those cars will be much more expensive because we don't actually have the capacity to be able to make all that stuff ourselves. And even if we did, making it in the United States is much more expensive rather than purchasing it from, say, Vietnam or a poorer country like somewhere in Southeast Asia or India. What do you say to those people who have concerns about rising costs?
Well, I think it's very legitimate to have concerns about rising costs. And of course, we've all heard the rumors that, the automotive costs could increase by up to $12,000 per car. I think that's likely way overstated, but even if it's $4,000, I mean, that's an impact on American consumers. So that's really the only benefit the U.S. has had. I think there were 3 different promises that were made about globalization. One was that China would mellow and, they would stop producing nuclear weapons and they would become our allies or friendly trade partners. And in fact, they become much more, aggressive and much more determined, taking over our country from within, buying up our, elite capture, buying up the president of the United States. Joe Biden, of course, most people know that he was largely controlled or bought by China. So that's not something we want to see anymore. And unfortunately, a lot of our politicians are still, China, bought by China. They obtain massive donations from Chinese connected, lobbying groups, and there's just kind of this incestuous relationship. But I would say that, I think that when it comes to the automotive industry in particular, that is a national security issue because, for example, during World War II, we converted our automotive industry into producing, tanks.
Sure.
And without those tanks, it would have taken us many years longer to win World War II. Certainly in Europe, maybe not in the Pacific, but would have been, could have made the difference in terms of, defeating Germany when we did. And it could also make a big difference in fighting a war against China, but particularly a land war, against Russia. I don't think that's really on the table anymore. Thanks to Trump. But I think I'm glad you can see that national security tariffs, make sense. And I understand why you would say, friendly countries or even unfriendly countries, but not enemies. Maybe we don't tariff them. I think probably the best argument that the tariff skeptics, I guess I would say, have is that these tariffs make sense, but they should be phased in. Instead of the market shock, we'd maybe have a schedule, where Trump would say phase in 1/3 of the tariff amount, and then 6 months later, another increase, or probably every 3 months, but just to kind of phase it in to give time for people to adjust.
So do you have any issue with tariffs at all?
Well, I think tariffs should be, in general, they should be moderate, they should be reciprocal, and they should be revenue-based and national security-based. So we use the tariffs to cut taxes. We want to abolish the income tax. I think Trump might be considering that, maybe moving to a national sales tax. It was the tariffs that, were that was how we became the world's greatest manufacturing power in the late 19th century. It's how we became the world's greatest economy. If we had low tariffs or free trade, from the time of our inception, we'd have a third world colonial economy. We wouldn't produce much of anything because, the rest of the world has had protective tariffs. So, that's why it's so important is, when it comes to our manufacturing industries, especially the ones that are strategic or national security related, we simply have to have tariffs for those things. Do I think we should be exceeding other countries' tariffs? No, I don't. I don't believe in punitive tariffs. When Trump talks about, 100, 200% tariffs on Russia if they don't make peace. I think it was Lindsey Graham that co-sponsored a bill in the Senate, 500% tariffs on Russia, secondary tariffs. That's just stupidity. Those tariffs would go against China, go against India. I don't want to see that. I think we should keep trading with China, but I think it needs to be reciprocal, in terms of the tariffs. And again, I would be happy to see 0% tariffs. If they go to 0% and they stop manipulating their currency, I would have no problem at all going to 0% on our end as well.
So you're not necessarily in favor of tariffs for all things. You kind of make exceptions for national security and then also for people who aren't playing by the rules. Is that right?
Exactly. Yeah, I want to see. I'm a believer in bilateral free trade or bilateral fair trade. So a lot of the kind of the libertarians have been supporters of globalism, or what I call unilateral free trade. So we have 4% tariffs or 2% tariffs in the case of China. They have 67% or even 96% tariffs on us. Anyone that understands economics understands that's a huge wealth drain on the U.S. economy.
Right.
It exports. We've exported 90,000 manufacturing industries to China during the last 25 years. So it's been a massive failure. They can now outbuild us in ships 232 times to 1.
Wow.
If we fought a war with China, it would be a guaranteed loss, and the main reason is because we've lost our ability to build things. We can't even build nuclear weapons. We've been trying to build new nuclear warheads for the last five years or so.
Really?
We haven't been able to produce a single one.
Wow. I had no idea that's a major threat.
It is.
Here's a map that I saw today. I don't know if you can see it very well. I'll maximize it so we can take a look at it. So right here, I don't know if you can tell, but it says the global dominance trade based on what country was trading with the most. So you see in the 2000s, so in 2000, all of the Western Hemisphere, pretty much all of Europe, almost all of Africa, lots of Asia, Australia, was trading with the United States as a dominant trade partner. Then you zoom into 2024, so last year, and almost the entire world is trading with China as their dominant partner. All of Africa, almost all of Europe, all of Asia, almost all of South America. The only places that America is the dominant partner is a couple spots in Western Europe, a few places in South America and Central America. Besides that, China has literally dominating the entire planet with cheap goods they're made to undercut Americans specifically.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. And those years are really critical. The years on that map. It was in 2000 that the Clinton and the Bush administration approved world WTO membership for China. And of course, Gingrich led the charge along with Bill Clinton on permanent most favored nation status for China. And that was really the turning point where we essentially pursued this globalist unilateral free trade policy under the fallacy that, that China would mellow, that, the richer we made it, the less militarily oppositional or confrontational that it would become. And I strongly oppose that. I probably would have strongly opposed that even if I had not been a tariff supporter, just on national security grounds. So very predictable outcome. It was exactly what Pat Buchanan, my favorite presidential candidate ever, pretty much predicted. And it's what's so interesting is President Trump, he ran against Pat Buchanan in the Reform Party presidential nomination and lost, and then proceeded to adopt virtually his entire campaign platform, including his campaign slogan of America First, and has done so very successfully. With the exception of Trump's plan to maybe wage war on Iran, I couldn't be happier with everything he's doing right now.
Awesome. Well, news came out literally while I was preparing the show that Trump is putting on a 90-day suspension of tariffs. And let me read the post that he shared on Truth Social. It says, based on a lack of respect that China has shown to the world's markets, I am hereby raising the tariff charge to China by the United States of America to 125% effective immediately. At some point, hopefully in the near future, China will realize that the days of ripping off the USA and other countries is no longer sustainable or acceptable. Conversely, and based on the fact that more than 75 countries have called representatives of the United States, including the Department of Commerce, Treasury, and USTR, to negotiate a solution to the subjects being discussed relative to trade barriers, tariffs, currency manipulation, and non-monetary tariffs, and that these countries have not, at any strong suggestion, retaliated in any way, shape, or form against the United States, I have authorized a 90-day pause and a sustainably lowered reciprocal tariff during this period of 10%, also effective immediately. Thank you for your attention to this matter. Had you seen this before?
I had, and I welcome this move. I think it really underscores the fact that that these tariffs are primarily national security based. They're primarily focused on China. China's the only one other than Canada that's retaliated against the U.S. I don't think we need to have a trade war with Canada. I'm not really supportive of that. But when it comes to China, we absolutely should be having a trade war. We should not consider defending Taiwan against the Chinese blockade or invasion, but a trade war is definitely something we should do on national security grounds. But I think the markets reacted very positively. I saw It was near 2,800 point increase on the Dow earlier today. I don't know what it finished at because I was away from my office, but obviously very positive. And I think this is going to really stabilize things and increase the confidence of markets in the president.
I think a lot of people, especially the left, is always going to complain about whatever Trump does. So you can never really take their criticism seriously. he could, like he said in his address to Congress, he could invent a cure for cancer and they would still find a way to not like him. They're not going to stand for the kid who has a brain disorder who wants to be a police officer. They couldn't stand for him. So obviously they're going to be oppositional to him. But I did hear a lot of people complain that Trump's just fighting people for no reasons, that these tariffs are going to be horrible, that this and that. But clearly the tariffs were used in a very smart and strategic way to negotiate with these countries. 75 countries coming to you and saying, please don't do this. We'll give you whatever you want is an absolute win. And for all those people who were super worried, and as Trump put them as panicans, I wonder what they have to say now.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to see 75 trade deals with other countries. I'm less of a supporter with trade deals with supranational organizations like the EU, or even some kind of the NAFTA replacement that Trump negotiated, the USMCA. I think that was a really bad deal for the U.S. But in general, I'm a supporter of fair trade deals on a bilateral basis, and I think that's what Trump has in mind. It can only benefit the U.S. to do this. So I think even people that are really skeptical of tariffs understand that even the threat of tariffs from a country with the second most powerful economy in the world, like the U.S., is can give us a big advantage in terms of national security, diplomacy, and trade leverage.
100%. Well, I know you've got to get going here. I really appreciate you coming on the show, and we'd love to have you on again at some time, because I have a lot of questions about why you don't like the EU. And I think we probably share a lot of those concerns. So I'd love to have you back sometime. But David, really appreciate having you on. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on. I'd be happy to come on again whenever you want.
Okay. Thanks, man.
Thanks.
Okay. Well, if you haven't subscribed, go ahead. You can go over to our YouTube channel. It's called Main Street Media Utah. Again, I'm Dan the Eagle, and I do this every Wednesday at 4:30. We have different guests who come on who are really excited. If you want to call in and ask me any questions, I know David has to get going, but the number is 385-899-2134. The lonely call screener is waiting, and we can take any questions that you might have. I should have done that with David before he left. That was an absolute oversight on my part, but I just got lost in the conversation, lost in the sauce, as kids say it these days. But go over to X, go to Rumble, go to YouTube, subscribe to our channel, like the video. It's on KMMU or Main Street Media Utah. Either one of those will do just fine. So I don't really have anything else to talk about. I was really trying to get Senator Fillmore to come on this show and talk about his bill that's going to ban school cell phone use in schools. I wasn't able to get him on this week. There was a little bit of a schedule issue there, but I'm going to try to get him on for next week, because I have a lot of questions about what we can do to keep our schools better. We can keep our students on track. We can make sure that students are not sitting there on their phones when they should be paying attention to class and getting along with other classmates. So until then, I'll see you guys then on Wednesday, 4:30 on this channel. See you later.